Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Building Games on AWS. In this series, we'll be talking about various security topics as they apply to game development. In this episode, we'll be talking about how to protect against ransomware and ransom attacks. Now, in recent years, these types of attacks have caused many millions of dollars in damages, including to video game companies. Fortunately, AWS offers a suite of tools to help you mitigate these kinds of attacks. Today, I'm joined by Joshua McKitty, who will be discussing how you can harden your application security and be prepared for these types of attacks.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. Yeah, I'm Josh McKitty, and I'm a security consultant specializing in threat detection and incident response on the AWS Customer Incident Response team. I'm also an avid gamer as well.
Awesome, and thank you for joining us today. Now, to start, what's the most common way ransomware is used by attackers?
Yeah, so the most common of them is encryption ransomware or crypto ransomware. This is where files on a system are encrypted by an attacker through maybe an executable file distributed by an email campaign or other type of malicious download. And then that executable searches for and encrypts certain types of files, such as Word documents, PDF files, databases, valuable types of files for folks. There are other types of attacks that are becoming more common, such as the ransom of data. So that's when an attacker is able to copy data from their target and then ransom that data by stating that they'll return or delete the copy data if they pay a ransom, and threatening to release it if they do not.
I see. So, with an understanding of the nature of these attacks, I wanted to get into some mitigation strategies. So, first, what are some key measures that our customers could use to avoid these attacks altogether?
Yeah, so some of the key measures that come to mind to avoid these attacks are first to apply the latest patches for your compute resources, um, specifically security patches for your operating system. So if you have a compute resource that has an operating system, make sure that it has the latest security patches and is up to date from that side. Um, the next step is to scoping your security groups to only the required network traffic. So if you have a resource that is designed not to be public, for example, then ensure that it's not publicly available. Make sure that it doesn't have access from the outside world, and that only the required traffic, the only the required rules are there for the traffic that it needs. And if it is designed to be a public resource, such as a web server, ensure that it's protected by a web application firewall or WAF. Um, if if it also is a web server, it's good to have something to broker that connection, such like a load balancer, in order to log load balancer type traffic as well. Moving on, logging is another key measure. Logging will be able to provide details that you will want to use for investigating these types of things, as well as enable you to generate alerts based off the anomalies within your environment. Uh, Another step is to create backups in advance. So using backups in order to restore from a known good state is crucial when you're dealing with ransomware. If you don't have something that's recorded as a known good state, that could put you in trouble because you might have to fix the other one, the one that has ransomware. Restoring from a backup allows you to be able to keep your business running without while you triage the infected resource. And then the last one that comes to mind is enabling guard duty. So Amazon Guard Duty is our anomaly detection tool that allows you to look for security threats in your environment and act on those security events. So those are the key measures that come to mind when protecting yourself against ransomware.
These all sound like really useful strategies to just avoid these kinds of attacks completely. Now, to build off of these things, with the idea of the more general ransom attack, like you were mentioning earlier, could you discuss how users could protect their data on AWS from those kinds of attacks?
Yeah, so the first thing you want to consider on how to protect your data is encryption. If you have data that's important to you, encryption allows you to protect that data if it's exfiltrated without access to the encryption keys. Another thing that's not widely discussed is logging. Again, for important data, you want to know who accessed it, when they accessed it, and what exactly they accessed. Logging allows you to have alerts on activity, and you can investigate quickly on actions that don't fall into your normal activity. Uh, the last thing is using the principle of least privilege. For your data, you should only allow access to personnel or processes that need access, with all others being denied implicitly.
Encryption and restricting access sound like great ways to protect your data. Now, to hit on a topic that you mentioned earlier about having the latest security patches, I was wondering if there was a way to automate checks for new security patches on your resources on AWS.
Yeah, so we do have a service called AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager. I know it's a very long name. That automates the process of patching nodes. This helps
And
apply security-related patches along with other types of updates as well.
Systems Manager Patch Manager sounds like a great way to help customers eliminate a manual process. Now, to move along and also to go along with preventative measures, I was wondering if we could discuss ways to detect malicious activity.
Sure. So some preventive measures that we have. The first one is Amazon Inspector. That's for threat detection on your EC2 and ECR compute resources. Another preventative measure is Amazon Guard Duty. So Amazon Guard Duty uses machine learning and threat intel uh, feeds for unexpected or unauthorized activity. It analyzes VPC flow logs, DNS logs, CloudTrail logs, etc. And it's good for finding things wrong with the Amazon S3, Amazon EC2, or AWS IAM services. And nowadays, before S3 protection wasn't a default feature, but if you've enabled it after July 2020, now it's a default feature. So S3 protection is included into Guard Duty by default. You can also create alerts based on Amazon Guard Duty. So Amazon Guard Duty doesn't alert you proactively, um, but if you use a combination of Amazon Event Bridge and Amazon SNS, you can take those Guard Duty findings, and when they're generated, you can use the Amazon Event Bridge and SNS to proactively get alerts based off of a Guard Duty finding. Another preventative measure would be VPC flow logs. So they monitor the traffic in and out of your VPC. This can be used to look at trends, and anything that is unusable can be alerted on. Another preventative measure is CloudTrail Insights. So CloudTrail Insights is designed to use your CloudTrail, and it can help you identify unusual operational activity within that's being seen in your CloudTrail for any given AWS account.
These all sound like very useful tools for our customers. Now, building off of your mention of CloudTrail Insights, I was wondering if you could talk about how our customers could set up alarms from their logs.
Yeah, so the easiest way to set up alarms for your logs is you can use, as mentioned before, a combination of Amazon Event Bridge and SNS. That's a very simple and straightforward way to set up a proactive alert. So when activity that you want to be notified about happens, you can use the Amazon Event Bridge to create a rule for that, and then the SNS topic to subscribe to if that rule is triggered. So a good example, again, back to guard duty. Um, if Amazon Guard Duty sees an alert, it's meant to be high fidelity. It's not meant to be a noisy alert. The fact that you're getting any Amazon Guard Duty alert, you can create an Amazon Event Bridge rule to alert on any Amazon Guard Duty activity, and then create an Amazon SNS topic to subscribe to that. So when that activity occurs, you know that you proactively receive that via a mechanism like email, and then you can go into your AWS account and immediately investigate that.
That sounds like an extremely useful strategy for detection. Now, moving on to the next main topic I wanted to hit on. If a customer is hit by a ransom attack or ransomware, how should they respond?
Yeah, so there are several steps that you take in order to respond to a ransom attack or ransomware. The first one is identify what was impacted and or what happened. And to do that, you would review logs. You would start with your AWS CloudTrail logs, Amazon VPC flow logs, Amazon S3 access logs, and Amazon Guard Duty. These are all logging sources that you can use to review what happened and what was impacted. You can perform analysis on those logs to look for malicious activity using Amazon Athena. So Amazon Athena is a query service that you can use to analyze data using SQL. The next step would be to identify backups and review your disaster recovery plan or business continuity plan. If you do have backups, you want to try to get back to a working state so your business could continue to operate. So invoking that disaster recovery plan or business continuity plan with those backups is crucial. And then the next step is to isolate the infected resources. So if you've identified the infected resources, you want to identify that quickly. And depending on the resource, a simple way to isolate an affected resource is to remove access to from and to it. For example, if you have an Amazon EC2 instance affected with ransomware, an easy way to isolate is to remove the security group rules that allow it to have a connection to the network. Now, that could be heavy-handed. If heavy-handed way to do that. So in this case, if you go all the way back to the analysis step, if you have VPC flow logs on, you can perform analysis first and then use something like a network access control list rule or NACL rule to limit the specific IP address that's in question, no matter if it's inbound or outbound.
These all sound like really useful strategies, although hopefully our customers won't ever have to deal with this situation. Now, to add on to this, I was wondering if you could explain to our customers why they shouldn't pay the attacker if they ever do have to face this situation.
Yeah, so there's no advantage to paying a ransom. The best things to do are to continue performing and implementing your best security practices, such as updating your operating systems and any antivirus solutions that you're using, ensuring that you have backups and can restore from those backups, and activating your business continuity plan or BCP if you have one. Additionally, you can consider engaging law enforcement relative to your country.
Thank you for talking about that. I thought that it would be important to mention while we're talking about this. Now, to move on to the final key topic that I wanted to talk about, what are some points to think about when recovering from one of these attacks after your response?
Yeah, so some key points to think about are to restore to a last known good configuration, whether that's using Amazon EBS snapshots, the AWS backup service, or Amazon S3 versioning if Amazon S3 is involved. You want to remediate the source of the issue once identified. So once you've identified the source, you want to isolate that and perform remediation actions. And then perform post analysis of your event. So implementing that means implementing security controls to ensure the attack doesn't repeat itself, and also implement any lessons learned from the ransomware attack. Some examples of lessons learned are your AWS IAM policies least privileged? Are you using encryption? Are you logging access and activity to important resources? If you are you alerting on those logs that you care about? And do you have backups? If so, were you able to restore successfully or with the least amount of interruption? So the restore process, testing that is also crucial as well. Those are some examples of lessons learned.
I see. Hopefully, our customers won't have to learn these lessons the hard way, though. Now, I have one last question for you while on the topic. Since some ransom attacks will involve the deletion of data, what's a good way to prevent accidental or, in this case, maybe malicious deletion of data?
Yeah, so one way to prevent accidental or malicious deletion is Amazon S3 versioning if it involves Amazon S3. Versioning allows you to have multiple variants of an object, and you can restore those variants upon deletion to help recover a previous object state. In addition, you can enable MFA or multi-factor authentication delete on a given S3 bucket, which, just as it says, assures that objects that are to be deleted use multi-factor authentication in order to delete them. If you have an S3 bucket where objects should never be deleted, this is a great mechanism for preventing the accidental or malicious deletions.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode, Joshua. It's been a pleasure.
Glad. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.